The first thing you need to understand about family is that it's a beautifully crafted lie. We polish it, we present it, we hang it on the wall like a beloved portrait. We never stop to check if the frame is rotten or if the canvas is crawling with mites. We just smile and tell everyone, that's us, that's my clan. My name is Harold Alistair Finch, but to the world, to the leeches clinging to my legacy, I am Grandfather Harry. For 84 years, I built an empire from sweat and silence. I built a family from love and trust. Also I thought, turns out, I'm a better businessman than a patriarch. The empire stands, solid and imposing. The family, a house of cards in a stiff breeze. It all started to crumble about a year ago, with a cough. Not a dramatic, death-rattle cough you see in the movies, but a persistent, tickling thing deep in my chest that wouldn't quit. Doctors poked and prodded, their faces evolving from professional neutrality to a practiced, sympathetic grimace. The word terminal was used. Time, they said, is a commodity you should spend wisely. I've always been wise with my commodities, so I decided to spend my remaining time uncovering the truth. I hired a man discreet, expensive, ruthlessly efficient to do what I had never dared. Look my family in the eye, through a telephoto lens and the bank statements. The dossier he delivered 3 months ago wasn't just a report, it was a demolition order on my entire life. My daughter, Eleanor, the poised and perfect matriarch of her own little world, had been systematically siphoning funds from the family trust for a decade. Not for greed, oh no. To cover the gambling debts of her feckless husband, Robert, a man so bland I once forgot his name of a toast at their anniversary party. She'd been betraying me to protect a man who'd bet their children's college fund on a horse named Lucky Streak. My grandson, Jeremy, the tech whiz I was so proud of, the one he'd handed the reins of my flagship company to, was preparing to stage a hostile takeover. Had been whispering to venture capitalists, painting me as a doddering old fool, to out of touch to see the future. He was planning to sell my life's work, piece by piece, to the highest bidder before my body was even cold. And Sarah, my sweet Sarah, my youngest granddaughter, the artist, the free spirit, it funded her gallery, her travels, her life of bohemian luxury. The investigators' photos showed her, not in a paint-splattered studio, but in the arms of my lawyer, Benjamin Croft, my friend of 40 years, the man who was drafting my will. Their affair was 2 years old. They were waiting for me to die, so they could claim her inheritance and run off together. Doubtless funded by the legal fees Croft had been bleeding from my accounts. The betrayal was a physical weight, a cold stone lodged in my gut where the cancer was slowly blooming. They weren't vultures circling a dying man, they were maggots, already inside, feasting. The anger was a pure, white-hot thing. It burned away the self-pity, the fear of the end. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of leaving my world, my legacy, in the hands of these strangers, these traitors. And then, the idea. It didn't come in a flash of lightning, but as a slow, creeping smile in the dead of night. A final test. A last supper of my own design. They wanted my money. They would have to pay for it. The currency would be the truth. The planning was meticulous, a project that gave me a reason to wake up each morning. The poison was the first element. I needed something terrifying, something with a known, dreadful reputation, but something I could safely administer. I settled on ricin. The mere mention of it induces primal fear. A few grains, a slow, agonizing death with no antidote. Perfect. The ricin I procured from a shady online botanist with a dubious reputation was, in fact, a meticulously ground mixture of harmless castor bean husks for the faint, bitter almond scent, and a potent laxative. The placebo effect is a powerful thing. Fear is the real poison. Next, the venue. My dining room, the scene of 1,000 family celebrations, birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. The long, mahogany table where they'd all smiled and lied to me 4 years. The irony was exquisite. The invitations were sent. Not an email, not a phone call. Formal, heavy cream cardstock, delivered by hand. You are cordially invited to a final feast, a private dinner with Harold, this Sunday, 7 p.m. sharp. Attendance is mandatory, no exceptions, no regrets. They all called, of course. Eleanor, with her cloying, concerned daughter voice. Father, are you sure you're up for this? A final feast. It sounds so morbid. I'm dying, Eleanor, it said, my voice a dry rasp. Morbidity is a privilege I've earned. Be here. Jeremy was all business. Grandad, I've got a merger meeting on Monday that's critical. Can we make this quick? The only thing that will be quick, Jeremy, is your departure from my will if you are not seated at my table at 7 o'clock. I hung up. He'd be there. Sarah was a weepy mess. Grandpa, I can't bear the thought of saying goodbye. Then don't say goodbye, my dear, I.D. replied. The words ash in my mouth. Just come and eat. The day arrived. I dressed with care, a dark, tailored suit, a tie of deep crimson. I looked every inch the wealthy patriarch, the lion in winter. The housekeeper, Mrs. Henderson, a stout, loyal woman who'd been with me for 30 years, had prepared the meal to my exact specifications. She knew the plan, every detail. Her own pension was tied to my estate. Her contempt for my family's hypocrisy was a fierce, quiet flame. She was my sole accomplice. The table was a masterpiece of macabre elegance. My finest china, the silver that dated back to my great-grandfather, crystal glasses that caught the light from the grand chandelier. But the centerpiece was new, a large, ornate, antique brass bowl filled with perfect red apples, a nod to the original forbidden fruit, a promise of knowledge they would wish they'd never tasted. At 6:55 p.m., I heard the first car on the gravel drive. My heart, a tired old drum, thumped once, hard, against my ribs. This was it. The curtain was rising on my final, grand performance. They arrived in a cluster, a nervous flock of black cashmere and somber expressions. Eleanor and Robert first, she looking strained, he looking bored. Then Jeremy, already on his phone, his brow furrowed as if the fate of the free market was more important than his grandfather's Last Supper. Finally, Sarah, her eyes red-raw, clinging to the arm of Benjamin Croft, who had the audacity to look solemn and loyally. Benjamin, I said, not moving from my position at the head of the table. This is a family dinner. He offered a tight, professional smile. Harold, Sarah was upset. I thought she could use the support. How fortunate she has you, I said, my voice flat. Sit, both of you. The air was thick with unspoken tension. They took their usual seats. Eleanor at my right, Jeremy at my left, Sarah and Croft next to each other, further down. Robert sat opposite Eleanor, already eyeing the decanter of whiskey on the sidebar. Mrs. Henderson began serving the first course, a rich chestnut soup. The conversation was stilted, funereal. The house looks well, Father, Eleanor offered. It's being kept up, I replied. How are you feeling, Grandad? Jeremy asked, not looking up from his phone. Like a man with a limited expiration date, I said. He finally put the phone away. They picked at their food. I ate heartily. I had no fear of the meal to come. I'd never had an appetite like I did that night. The cancer could take my life, but it wouldn't take this moment from me. The main course was served. Beef Wellington, roasted potatoes, glazed carrots. The wine, 89 Bordeaux from my cellar, was poured. They drank deeply, seeking liquid courage. I watched them, these actors in my play, unknowingly rehearsing for their final roles. As Mrs. Henderson cleared the main course plates, I rose slowly, my joints complaining. All eyes turned to me. This was it. There's a tradition, I began, my voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. A final meal. A last request. If thought long and hard about mine, I have no interest in a favorite dish, a cherished wine. My appetite for such things has faded. I walked slowly to the centerpiece, the bowl of apples. I picked one up, feeling its cool, perfect weight in my hand. What I hunger for, I continued, looking at each of them in turn, is truth. A nervous glance between Eleanor and Robert. Jeremy shifted in his seat. Sarah looked down at her lap. I have spent a lifetime building. A business, a fortune, a family. I paused, letting the word hang in the air. I believe that legacy was my greatest achievement, my gift to you all. But a dying man sees things more clearly. He has less to lose by lifting up the rocks and looking at what squirms beneath. I placed the apple back in the bowl. So, my final request, my last supper, is for a confession. I turned and faced them fully. This meal you have just eaten has been poisoned. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. It was the kind of silence that seems to suck the air from the room. Robert was the first to break it. A choked, nervous laugh. "Oh, come on, Harry. A bit of melodrama for the big exit, eh?" I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just looked at him. Eleanor's face had gone pale. "Father, what are you talking about?" "Ricin," I said. The word a soft, deadly bullet in the quiet room. A slow-acting agent. Symptoms will begin in a few hours. Nausea, fever, a feeling of tightness in the chest. Then, the pulmonary edema. Your lungs will fill with fluid. You will, essentially, drown on dry land. There is no antidote. Sarah let out a small, strangled gasp. Benjamin Croft's mouth was hanging open. Jeremy was staring at me, his face a mask of utter disbelief. "You're insane," Robert whispered, his bravado gone, his face now ashen. "Perhaps," I conceded with a slight shrug. "The proximity of death often blurs the line. But the facts remain. You have ingested a lethal dose. You will all be dead within 48 hours. Panic. It's a fascinating thing to watch up close. It blooms in the eyes first, a wild, animal dilation. Then it travels to the hands, which tremble or clutch. Then the throat, which works soundlessly. Why?" Eleanor cried, her voice cracking. "My God, Father, why would you do this?" "I told you," I said calmly, returning to my seat at the head of the table. "I want the truth. Before I go, I want to know who you really are. I have my suspicions, of course, but suspicion is not certainty." I leaned forward, folding my hands on the table. "So, here is the only chance for a reprieve. The poison was in the wine. All of it came from the same bottle, decanted into that very carafe." I pointed to the now empty crystal vessel on the sidebar. "I drank from a different bottle entirely. There is one, and only one, way out of this." They were all staring at me, prisoners awaiting a verdict. "Confess," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "Confess your betrayal. The single worst thing you have done to me, to this family, with the intention of profiting from my death. Confess it fully, and I will provide the emetic I procured for myself. It will force your body to purge the contents of your stomach. It will be unpleasant, but you will live." I sat back. The choice is yours. Truth and life, or silence, and a very painful, very certain death. The room erupted. Robert shot to his feet, his chair screeching backwards. "This is murder. I'm calling the police." He fumbled for his phone. "By all means," I said, "dial. Explain to them how your dying father-in-law poisoned you at a family dinner. They will, of course, rush you to the hospital. They will pump your stomach, and they will find nothing. By the time they realize there is no poison, and that this is, at worst, a pathetic cry for attention from a sick old man, it will be too late for you. The ricin, if it were real, would be to deepen your system. You'll be dead before they can determine a cause. Sit down, Robert." He stood frozen, phone in hand, a man caught in a trap. Slowly, he sank back into his chair. It was Jeremy who spoke next, his voice tight with a cold, furious logic. "This is a bluff. You wouldn't do it. You're not a killer." "I'm a dying man, Jeremy," I replied, meeting his glare. "The rules no longer apply to me. What can they do? Give me life in prison. I have, at best, a few months. The risk, to me, is negligible. The potential reward, the truth, is everything. But ask yourself, are you willing to bet your life on the assumption that I'm bluffing? Look at me. Do I look like I'm bluffing?" I didn't. I was calm, resolute, utterly serene. The anger was there, but it was a cold engine, humming quietly inside me, powering my performance. I saw the doubt enter his eyes, the seed of fear taking root. It was Sarah who broke first. A low moan escaped her lips. She clutched her stomach. I feel sick. I feel it. Oh God, I feel it. It was psychosomatic, of course. The power of suggestion. But it was the spark that lit the tinderbox. It's the anxiety, Sarah, Croft said, putting a protective arm around her, though he himself had gone a sickly shade of grey. It's not real. Thei's playing mind games. Is it? I asked softly. Do you feel a slight tightening? A warmth? That's the beginning. And as if on cue, Robert gagged, pressing a napkin to his mouth. Jesus, he muttered. I do feel weird. The clock ticked. 5 minutes of silence passed. It felt like an hour. I could see the calculations going on behind their eyes. The weighing of pride against survival. The desperate, internal bargaining. Eleanor was the first to crack. A single tear traced a path through her perfect makeup. She looked at Robert, a look of pure, unvarnished contempt. Then back at me. It was me, she whispered, her voice ragged. All heads turned to her. Eleanor, no. Robert hissed. Shut up, Robert. She snapped, her voice gaining strength, fueled by terror and a sudden, desperate need to live. Father, it was the trust, the Atherton trust. I've been taking money. 4 years. I remained impassive. How much? She swallowed hard. To 200,000. Maybe more. I lost track. For what purpose? She began to cry in earnest now. Great. Heaving sobs that shook her entire frame. His debts. Robert's. He kept losing. At the track. At the casino. They threatened him. They threatened us. I had to. I was going to pay it back. I swear I was. I thought you'd never notice. I thought you'd be gone before she broke down. Collapsing forward onto the table, Robert stared at her, his face a grotesque mask of betrayal and terror. You stupid woman, he breathed. I turned my gaze to him. And you, Robert, nothing to confess. No debts owed to unsavory individuals. No leaning on your wife to steal from her own father to cover your failures as a man. He looked like a cornered rat. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape that didn't exist. The dam had broken. The first confession had opened the floodgates, and the need for self-preservation was now a tidal wave. It was her idea, he blurted out, pointing a shaking finger at Eleanor. She said the old man would never miss it. She said it was our money anyway. I just signed the papers she put in front of me. Eleanor looked up, her face a mess of tears and shock. You liar. You begged me. You said they'd break your legs. Their marriage, the perfect society union, dissolved into a snarling, frantic mess of mutual accusation right there at my dinner table. It was more than I could have hoped for. I let them go at each other for a moment before raising my hand. Enough. I looked at Jeremy. Your turn, grandson. The future titan of industry. What have you been building behind my back? Jeremy's face was slick with a fine sheen of sweat. He was clutching the edge of the table, his knuckles white. He was a boy who had never faced a problem that couldn't be solved with a spreadsheet or a well-placed call. This was beyond him. The merger, he stammered. It's not a merger, it's a buyout. I've been negotiating with Apex Ventures. They're going to buy a controlling interest. They want to break up the company. -1 off the divisions. I feigned a look of mild curiosity. And what was your role in this? Cheerleader. I brokered the deal, he said, his voice rising in pitch. I gave them the internal projections. I showed them how to structure it, so the board would have to approve. I did it. I did it all. I knew you'd never agree. You're stuck in the past. The company is stagnant. It needs new blood. It needs to be leaner. It was for the best. For who's best? I asked quietly. Your bonus from Apex is rumored to be quite substantial. He fell silent, his chest heaving. He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. The room stank of fear and sweat. 3 down. I turned my gaze to the end of the table, to Sarah, who was weeping softly, and to Benjamin Croft, who was holding her, his face a rigid mask of panic. Sarah, my dear, I said, my voice softening to a cruel parody of grandfatherly concern. You look unwell. Is there something you'd like to get off your chest? Perhaps something you've been sharing with my good friend and attorney, Benjamin. Croft found his voice, a dry, legalistic croak. Harold, this has gone far enough. This is coercion. Anything said here is under duress. It's inadmissible. Benjamin, I interrupted, my voice like ice. We are not in a court of law. We are in my dining room. The only thing at stake here is your life, your admissible heartbeat. Now, do you have a confession to make? Or would you prefer to spend your last hours drafting a legal brief against the inevitable? Sarah looked up at Croft, her eyes wide with terror. She was breaking. I could see it. The spoiled little girl who had never faced a consequence in her life was staring into the abyss. Ben, she whimpered. Tell him, please. I don't want to die. Croft closed his eyes for a moment, a defeated man. When he opened them, he looked every one of his 68 years. It's true, Harold, he said, his voice hollow. Sarah and I were in love. We have been for 2 years. I said nothing. I just waited. He took a shaky breath. We were waiting for you to pass. The will I structured it to give her a larger, direct inheritance, free from the trust. We were going to be together. And the legal fees, I prompted. The inexplicable bloating of your retainer over the past 18 months. Was that also for love? He flinched as if it struck him. He nodded, a tiny, shameful movement. Some of it, yes. I'm sorry, Harold. The room fell silent again. The 4 confessions hung in the air, toxic and foul. They were all looking at me, their eyes pleading, their bodies tense with the promised onset of a painful death. I looked at each of them, my thief daughter, her cowardly husband, my treacherous grandson, my deceitful granddaughter, and my duplicitous friend. I saw not a family, but a collection of flaws and failures, bound together by greed and my money. I slowly reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket. They watched, their breath held, expecting a small vial, a miracle cure. I pulled out a small, black digital voice recorder. I held it up for them all to see. I pressed the stop button. The tiny red light went out. Then, I smiled. It was not a warm smile. Fascinating, I said, my voice clear and strong in the dead silence. Absolutely fascinating. I placed the recorder on the table. The power of suggestion is a remarkable thing, isn't it? I continued. The mind, convinced of its own impending doom, can conjure symptoms from thin air. The tightening in the chest, anxiety, the nausea, fear, the warmth, adrenaline. Their faces were blank, uncomprehending. Ricin. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. My God, you think him a monster. Him a businessman. I deal in commodities, and the most valuable commodity, I have learned, is the truth. You were never in any physical danger. The wine was just wine. A rather excellent 89 Bordeaux, now tragically wasted on a pack of lying, scheming ingrates. The comprehension dawned on them slowly. A new kind of horror replacing the old. It was the horror of exposure, of utter, complete humiliation. You Jeremy breathed, his face morphing from fear to incandescent rage. You tricked us. I gave you exactly what you asked for, I corrected him calmly. A chance to unburden yourselves. And my, what heavy burdens they were. Theft, treason, adultery, fraud. I picked up the recorder. This is not a poison antidote. This is your disinheritance. Every word, every sordid detail, legally recorded. My new will, which Benjamin so helpfully drafted based on my previous, more generous instructions, will be void by morning. A new one is already written, locked in my safe. It leaves my entire estate, every last penny, every share of stock, every piece of property, to a consortium of charitable foundations dedicated to ethical business practices and supporting victims of financial fraud. The irony is not lost on me. I stood up, looking down at the ruin of my family. You came here tonight expecting a feast. You expected to inherit a kingdom. Instead, you gorged yourselves on your own treachery, and you leave here with nothing. You are disowned. You are disinherited. You are no longer my family. The silence that followed was deeper, more profound than the fear-filled one from before. It was the silence of absolute desolation. I walked to the door and opened it. The cool night air rushed in. "Get out of my house." Of course. Here is the second part of the story. The silence that followed my pronouncement was a physical thing. Thick and heavy, like a woolen blanket smothering the room. It was broken not by words, but by a sound from Sarah, a high, thin whine that seemed to originate from the very core of her. The sound of a soul realizing it has been not just wounded, but annihilated. Then chaos. It didn't erupt, it uncoiled, slow and venomous at first. Then all at once, Robert was the first to move. He didn't lunge at me, not physically. He lunged at the concept of what he'd done, his face purpling with a rage so profound it seemed to short-circuit his higher functions. He shot to his feet, his chair crashing to the floor behind him. You bastard," he snarled, spittle flying from his lips. "You senile, vindictive old fuck. You can't do this." "It would appear I just have, Robert," I said, my voice calm, a stark contrast to his sputtering fury. I remained by the open door, the night air a cool balm against the feverish heat of their shame. "The evidence of your character, and your wife's, is right here." I tapped the recorder in my breast pocket. "That's not evidence," he shouted, pointing a trembling finger. "That's its entrapment. It's illegal. You poisoned us." "Did I?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Are you feeling unwell? Perhaps you should sit down. The psychological effects of abject humiliation can be quite dizzying," I'm told. He took a step forward, and for a moment, I thought he might actually be stupid enough to try something. But Jeremy, of all people, stopped him. Jeremy's face had passed through rage and settled into a cold, calculating ice. He was in damage control mode. The merger was gone. His future was ash, but he was still a businessman, and a businessman knows when to cut his losses. "Sit down, Robert," Jeremy said, his voice low and tight. "Thei's got us. Thei's recorded us admitting to felonies, grand larceny, fraud, conspiracy." He turned his icy gaze to me. "It's a masterpiece, grandfather, truly. You've bankrupted us without spending a dime. If simply reallocated assets away from poor investments," I replied. It was Eleanor who found her voice next, but it wasn't the voice of my daughter. It was a raw, broken thing, scraped from the bottom of a well of despair. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the wreckage of her marriage, at the man who had just thrown her to the walls to save his own skin. "You said it was my idea," she whispered to Robert. The words were barely audible, but they cut through the room like a shard of glass. "After everything, after all the lying, the stealing, the fear, you said it was my idea." Robert didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He was still glaring at me, his chest heaving. "Well, it was, wasn't it? You're the one with the access. You're the one who knew how to do it." A sound escaped Eleanor's lips, something between a sob and a laugh. It was the most horrifying sound I'd heard all night. She slowly pushed her chair back and stood. She didn't look at anyone. She walked, with a strange, robotic steadiness, around the table, past Robert, and out the front door into the night. She didn't take her coat. She didn't say a word. She just left. Robert stared after her for a second, a flicker of confusion on his stupid, angry face, before turning back to me, as if I were the more pressing problem. Sarah was next. Her weeping had subsided into silent, shuddering tears. She looked at Benjamin Croft, who was staring blankly at the wall, his professional composure utterly shattered. The great legal mind, outmaneuvered and exposed. "You said it would be okay," Sarah accused him, her voice trembling. "You said he was old and wouldn't find out. You said we'd be safe." Croft didn't look at her. He just shook his head slowly. A man watching his entire life's work, his reputation, his career, his comfortable future evaporate before his eyes. "I miscalculated," he murmured, almost to himself. "I didn't factor in this. You didn't factor in me," I corrected him. "A fatal error for a lawyer. You of all people should know her to underestimate your opponent, especially when he has nothing left to lose." I looked at Sarah. "He didn't love you, my dear. He loved the idea of a young, beautiful woman and a large sum of my money. You were just the vehicle, a means to an end." The cruelty of the statement was necessary. It was the final turn of the knife. She needed to see the full depth of the hole she'd dug for herself. She let out a wounded cry and buried her face in her hands. "That's enough, Harold," Croft said, finding a shred of his old authority. "You've made your point. You've destroyed everyone. Is that what you wanted? To die alone, hated by everyone who ever cared for you?" I smiled then, a small, thin smile. "You didn't care for me, Benjamin. You cared for my retainer. And I am not alone. I have the truth for company. It's remarkably steadfast." I gestured again to the open door. "The show is over. The feast is concluded. Get out." Jeremy was the first to comply. He stood, straightened his suit jacket with a sharp, precise tug, and walked towards me. He stopped just short of the threshold, his eyes meeting mine. There was no pleading in them, no anger anymore, just a cold, professional respect. The kind one predator shows another. "I hope it was worth it," he said quietly. "It was," I replied. He gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod, and walked out into the night. Robert, muttering curses under his breath, stumbled after him, not even glancing at the ruin of his wife had left behind. Croft stood slowly, like an old man. He didn't look at me. He put a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Come on, Sarah, let's go." She flinched away from his touch. "Don't touch me," she hissed. Just go away." He hesitated for a moment. Then, with a sigh of utter defeat, he left, his shoulders slumped. That left Sarah, alone at the vast table, surrounded by the dirty plates and half-empty glasses of the Last Supper. She was crying again, soft, hopeless sounds. I felt a pang then, a sharp, unwelcome twinge of something that felt dangerously like regret. She was, after all, my granddaughter, the little girl who used to sit on my knee and tell me about her dreams of being a famous artist. But that girl was gone, replaced by this woman, this stranger who had betrayed me for a man who saw her as a line item on a balance sheet. "Sarah," I said, my voice softer than I intended. She looked up, her eyes red and swimming with tears. For a second, I saw that little girl again, lost and frightened. "Why?" she asked, the single word containing a universe of pain. "Why did you do it?" I countered. "Why him? Why the lies? I would have given you anything. I did give you everything. You gave me money." She cried, her voice breaking. "You bought me things. You didn't give me you. You were always in your study, on the phone, at the office. You were a monument, grandfather, not a person." Benjamin, he saw me. He listened. He made me feel real. It was a pathetic justification, the classic lament of the spoiled child who mistakes attention for love. But somewhere in its core, there was a sliver of truth. I had been distant. I had built walls around myself, walls made of stock reports and business deals. Perhaps I had built the very fortress they had now tried to besiege. But it was no excuse, not for this. "Feeling real is a poor consolation for being left with nothing," I said, the hardness returning to my voice. "A lesson you're about to learn firsthand. Now, I believe I asked you to leave." The vulnerability in her face shut down, replaced by a mask of youthful bitterness. She shoved her chair back, stood, and walked past me without another word, her head held high in a final, futile gesture of defiance. I closed the door behind her, the heavy oak thudding shut with a sense of profound finality. The lock engaged with a solid, satisfying click. The silence of the house descended upon me. It was different now. It wasn't the anxious silence of before the storm, or the chaotic silence after the explosion. This was the silence of a field after a battle. Empty, haunted, still. Mrs. Henderson emerged from the kitchen, her arms crossed over her broad chest. She looked at the wreckage of the dining room, the overturned chair, the spilled wine, the untouched dessert course. "Well," she said, her tone dry as dust, "that went about as well as could be expected." A bark of laughter escaped me, surprising us both. It was a raw, unfamiliar sound. "Indeed it did, Mrs. Henderson. Indeed it did. Shall I clear this mess?" she asked. "In the morning," I said, feeling the weight of the evening suddenly press down on me. The adrenaline was receding, leaving a vast, aching fatigue in its wake. The cancer in my chest gave a sympathetic throb, a reminder of its own relentless schedule. Leave it for tonight. I climbed the stairs to my study, each step an effort. The house felt enormous around me, a hollowed-out shell. I had wanted the truth, and I had gotten it. I had wanted to punish them, and I had. I had won. So why did it feel like such a Pyrrhic victory? I entered the study, the room that had been the command center of my life for 50 years. Leather-bound books, mahogany panels, the smell of old paper and polish. I went to the safe behind the false panel of bookshelf, worked the combination, and retrieved the new will. It was already signed and witnessed, Mrs. Henderson and my doctor, a man who understood discretion and was handsomely compensated for it, had taken care of that days ago. I placed the small digital recorder on the desk beside it. The two testaments, the old one, full of hollow promises to faithless people, the new one, and the recorded proof that justified its existence. I sank into my worn leather chair, the one that had molded itself to my shape over decades. I looked out the window at the dark grounds. Somewhere out there, my family was scattering to the winds, their lives irrevocably broken. I had orchestrated it all. I was the author of this particular tragedy, and I was tired. So very, very tired. The next few days were a study in quiet aftermath. The house phone rang incessantly. I let it. My personal mobile buzzed with texts, pleas, threats. I ignored them. Mrs. Henderson became my gatekeeper, her brusque, Scottish efficiency a shield against the world. The first legal letter arrived on Tuesday, from a firm I didn't recognize, representing Robert. It was a laughable document, full of bluster and threats, claiming coercion, undue influence, and mental incapacity. I had my new lawyer, a young pit bull of a woman from a rival firm who despised Croft, send a one-line response. We have the recording. Proceed at your own peril. We never heard from that firm again. Jeremy, ever pragmatic, tried a different tack. He showed up at the house on Wednesday, clean-shaven and calm. Mrs. Henderson told him was not receiving visitors. He didn't cause a scene. He simply left a letter. It was a masterpiece of corporate spin. He acknowledged his misjudgment, framed his actions as a misguided attempt to secure the company's future, and offered to work collaboratively to ensure a smooth transition of leadership. He ended by asking for a meeting to discuss reconciliation. There was no apology. It was a business proposal. I had it filed in the shredder. Eleanor called once. Mrs. Henderson took the message. She says she's leaving him, Mrs. Henderson reported, her face neutral. She's staying with a friend. She asked if you would please call her. I didn't. The theft that, perhaps, I could have eventually understood. Fear for a spouse, however misplaced, can make people do desperate things. But her silence over the years, her willingness to lie to my face day after day, that was the deeper betrayal. It would take more than leaving that fool Robert to mend a fracture that fundamental. Sarah was the only one who remained silent. No calls, no letters. I sometimes wondered where she was, if she was with Croft, trying to salvage something from the wreckage, or if she was finally, truly alone. A week after the dinner, I was in my study when Mrs. Henderson came in, her expression unreadable. There's a gentleman to see you. A Detective Miller. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. So, one of them had gone to the police after all. I had been expecting it. I nodded. Show him in. Detective Miller was a man in his late 40s, with a weary face and a comfortable suit that had seen long hours. He didn't look like a man about to make an arrest. He looked like a man following up on a frustratingly vague report. Mr. Finch, he said, showing his badge. Thank you for your time. In following up on a rather unusual report we received. I said, gesturing for him to sit. What sort of report? Well, that's the thing, he said, settling into the chair opposite me. It's a bit all over the place. We received calls from he consulted a small notebook, a Robert Evans, and a Ms. Sarah Finch, both alleging, and I quote, attempted murder by psychological means and illegal recording. The claims were contradictory and highly emotional. I steepled my fingers. I see. And what, precisely, are they alleging I did? That's just it, the detective said, sighing. Mr. Evans claims you poisoned a family dinner with a substance called ricin, but then later admitted it was a trick to get them to confess to various financial crimes. Ms. Fink's account was similar, though more focused on the emotional distress caused. I allowed a small, weary smile to touch my lips. Detective Miller, I am an 84-year-old man with stage 4 lung cancer. My life expectancy is measured in months. Do I look like a master criminal capable of orchestrating a mass poisoning? He gave me a practiced, neutral look. We have to follow up on all claims, sir. Of course, I said. And did either of them submit to a blood test to prove the presence of this alleged poison? They refused, he said, a hint of frustration in his voice. They claimed the poison was placebo, but the threat was real. I see, I said again. I leaned forward. Detective, my family and I had a dinner last week. It was, as you might imagine, a difficult affair. I have recently revised my will. The changes I made were unpopular. I believe the stress of the situation, combined with their disappointment, has led to some hysterical and fabricated allegations. He watched me carefully. They mentioned a recording. They did, I agreed. I often record important business meetings for my own reference. I did indeed record our dinner conversation. It contains no admissions of any crime, because no crimes were committed. It contains, solely, the sound of a family tearing itself apart over money. It is a private and deeply painful document. I have no intention of sharing it unless I am legally compelled to do so. It was a gamble, but a good cop knows the difference between a crime and a family dispute. He knew that even if he subpoenaed the recording, the best he'd get was evidence of their confessions, not of any crime it committed. It would be thrown out of any court long before it got to a prosecutor. Detective Miller closed his notebook. Mr. Finch, has anyone threatened you? Do you feel you are in any danger from your family? The question surprised me. No, detective, I do not. He stood up. I think that's all for now. I'm sorry to have troubled you. It seems this is a civil matter, a family matter. Thank you, detective, I said, rising slowly. It is indeed. He left, and I knew that was the end of it. The law had no interest in the messy, brutal theatre of a broken family. The battle was over. I had won. The world was quiet. The silence, however, began to change. The satisfaction of my victory, so sharp and sweet in the moment, began to curdle. The study, once my sanctuary, began to feel like a cage. The ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece became the sound of my life ebbing away, second by solitary second. I had wanted to expose their lies, and I had. I had wanted to ensure they couldn't profit from my death, and I had. But in stripping them away, I had stripped myself of everything too. I was the king of a deserted castle, the ruler of an empty kingdom. Mrs. Henderson tried her best. She brought my meals, which I picked at. She tried to make conversation, but I had no heart for it. I spent my days staring out the window, watching the autumn leaves turn and fall. The world was carrying on, indifferent to my personal tragedy. I began to dream of them, not of the betrayers they became, but of the children they were. Eleanor, so serious and proud, winning her first debate trophy. Jeremy, a tiny boy in a too big suit, following me around the office on Take Your Child to Work Day, asking 1,000 questions. Sarah, her small hand in mine, dragging me to see a painting shed made, her face alight with joy. The memories were a special kind of torture. They were the ghost of the family I thought I had, the family I had now systematically destroyed. Had I created this? Had my ambition, my absence, my focus on building an empire instead of building relationships, forged the people who would eventually try to plunder it? The question echoed in the empty halls of my house, and in the hollowed out chambers of my heart. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the dinner, I was dozing in my chair when Mrs. Henderson came in. "There's someone here to see you," she said. Her tone was different, not wary, as with the detective, nor dismissive, as with Jeremy. It was gentle. "I'm not seeing anyone," I mumbled, not opening my eyes. "I think you'll want to see this one," she said softly. I opened my eyes. She was gone. But standing in the doorway of my study was Eleanor. She looked decades older. She wore a simple, plain dress, no makeup. Her eyes were clear, but shadowed with a deep, enduring sadness. She held no purse, no phone. She looked stripped bare. We looked at each other for a long time. The anger was gone. The recriminations were gone. There was just a vast, weary chasm between us. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice quiet. I nodded slowly. She stepped into the room but didn't sit. She walked over to the bookshelf, her fingers trailing absently along the spines of the books, as if remembering a time when she felt welcome here. "I've left him," she said finally, not looking at me. "For good this time. I've rented a small apartment. I'm working at a gallery. Cataloguing. It doesn't pay much." I said nothing. I just watched her. "I'm not here for money, Father," she said, turning to face me. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "I know that bridge is burned. I'm not even here to ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it." "Then why are you here?" I asked, my voice rough from disuse. "Because you're dying," she said simply. The words hung in the air, blunt and undeniable. "And because I realized I wasn't just stealing from you to save Robert. I was punishing you." That got my attention. I straightened up in my chair. "Punishing me? For never being there," she said, her gaze steady. "For always choosing the business over us. For Mother's loneliness. For everything. I think a part of me wanted to get caught. I wanted you to finally see me. Even if it was just to see what a disappointment I was." Her honesty was disarming. It was the first completely truthful thing she had said to me in years, perhaps decades. "I saw you," I said. "I saw a thief." "I know," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "And you were right to see me that way. I was a thief. I am so sorry, Father, not for getting caught, for doing it in the first place, for betraying you, for becoming the kind of person who could do that." She wasn't pleading. She was just stating a fact, owning it. The hardness around my heart, the shell I had built so carefully, developed a hairline crack. "I am sorry, too," I heard myself say. The words were foreign on my tongue. "For not being the father you needed. For being a monument." She nodded, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. We were silent again, but this silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was full of all the things we had never said. All the years we had wasted. "I can't change the will, Eleanor," I said. "The others, what they did, I know," she said quickly. "I don't want you to. It's yours to do with as you see fit. I couldn't let you." She took a shaky breath. "I couldn't let you die without telling you I was sorry, and that I love you, despite everything." She turned and walked out of the study, as quietly as she had entered. I sat there for a long time after she left, staring at the space where she had been. The crack in the shell widened. The victory I had clung to now felt like ash in my mouth. I had exposed the truth, but I had forgotten that truth, no matter how ugly, could also be a starting point. It could have been the beginning of a reckoning, perhaps even a reconciliation. Instead, I'd used it as a weapon to ensure we all died alone. I'd been so focused on their betrayal that I had blindfolded myself to my own. I had betrayed my role as a father, as a grandfather. I had chosen a final, dramatic act of revenge over the messy, difficult work of forgiveness. The doorbell rang again later that evening. Mrs. Henderson appeared at my study door. Her expression was even more peculiar than before, a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "Sir," she said, "it's all of them." I looked up, confused. "All of whom?" "Them," she said. "Mr. Jeremy, Miss Sarah, and the lawyer, Mr. Croft. They're all here, together." A cold dread washed over me. What was this? A final, united assault? Had they somehow joined forces to contest the will? Had Eleanor's visit been a ruse, a scout sent ahead to soften me up? I felt the old anger stir, the defensive walls slamming back into place. Send them away. "I don't think that's advisable, sir," Mrs. Henderson said, a strange note in her voice. You should see this." Curiosity and a deep, weary suspicion got the better of me. I nodded. Show them into the drawing room. I took my time going down. I wanted them to wait. I wanted them to stew. I entered the drawing room, my face a mask of cold impatience. They were standing apart from each other, a tense, awkward triangle of misery. Jeremy, looking uncomfortable out of his corporate environment. Sarah, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, staring at the floor. And Benjamin Croft, looking older and more diminished than he'd ever seen him. He was holding a large, thick envelope. "What is the meaning of this?" I demanded, not moving from the doorway. "Have you come to threaten me as a group? I assure you, it won't work." Jeremy spoke first. "Grandfather, we're not here to threaten you." He took a step forward. "We're here to surrender." I laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Surrender. The war is over. You lost." "We know," Sarah said, her voice small. We're not here about the money." That stopped me. "Then what?" It was Croft who answered. He held out the envelope. "This is everything, Harold. Every document, every financial record, the original will drafts, the falsified billing statements, the plans for the company takeover, the transfers from the trust. It's all here. The unvarnished, complete truth." I didn't take it. I just stared at him. "Why?" "Because Eleanor was right," Jeremy said, his voice low. "She came to see each of us today. She said what you did was monstrous, but that we drove you to it. She said we were so busy being angry about being caught that we weren't seeing the bigger picture." "Which is?" I asked, my heart beginning to beat a strange, irregular rhythm. "That we're a family," Sarah whispered, finally looking up at me. Her eyes were full of tears. "A broken, horrible, messed up family, but the only one we've got." Jeremy nodded. "She said you were dying alone because of us, but that we were going to have to live with ourselves, and with each other, for a long time, and that the only way to even start was to give it all back. The lies, the secrets, all of it." Croft placed the envelope on a small table. "I am resigning from the bar, Harold. I am disgraced, and I deserve to be. This is my confession. For the record, for whatever you want to do with it." I looked at the three of them. The proud grandson, the spoiled granddaughter, the cunning lawyer. They were broken. Truly, honestly broken. Not by my clever trick, but by the weight of their own actions, reflected back at them by the one person they hadn't expected to show them mercy. Each other. Eleanor hadn't come to me to ask for forgiveness. She had come to make her peace. And then she had gone out and done what I, in all my calculated revenge, had failed to do. She had tried to put the pieces back together. The crack in my shell shattered. I walked slowly into the room and picked up the envelope. It was heavy, filled with the proof of their treachery, the final, physical evidence of my victory. I walked to the fireplace. A small fire was burning, taking the chill off the autumn evening. Without a word, without looking back at them, I tossed the entire envelope into the flames. The gasp from behind me was unanimous. "Father," Jeremy began. "The recording is in my safe," I said, watching the papers blacken and curl. "I will destroy it tonight. The will remains. The money will still go to the foundations. That is not negotiable. You forfeited that right, and consequences must remain." I turned to face them. "But this poison ends now, with me." The look on their faces was not one of relief or joy. It was one of utter, profound shock. They had come expecting a battle, prepared for further condemnation. They had not come prepared for a pardon. "I don't expect us to be a family again," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "The trust is gone. It may never come back. But perhaps we can stop being enemies." Sarah started to cry in earnest, silent tears streaming down her face. Jeremy looked down, blinking rapidly. Croft simply bowed his head. They left soon after, walking out into the night, not as a united front, but as individuals, each carrying their own share of the burden, but perhaps a little lighter than before. I went up to my study, retrieved the recorder, and carried it down to the fireplace. I held it for a long moment, this little black box that contained the power to ruin lives. Then I threw it into the embers. It popped and cracked, the plastic melting, the digital truth within turning to irrecoverable ash. I'd wanted a final feast, a dramatic exit. I had gotten one. But the real story wasn't about the poison, or the confessions, or the revenge. It was about what came after. It was about the tiny, fragile possibility of something new growing from the scorched earth. I am still dying. The cough is worse. The tiredness is deeper. But the house doesn't feel as empty anymore. Jeremy comes by once a week, not to talk business, but to talk. Really talk. Sarah sends me paintings. She's working on not good ones, but honest ones. Eleanor calls. We don't talk about the past. We talk about the weather, about a book she's reading, about nothing at all. And it's everything. I thought I was staging a finale. Instead, I was given an epilogue. It's not a happy ending. Those are for storybooks. This is Messier. It's flawed. It's human. And for the time I have left, it is enough. The silence after they left was different. It wasn't the hollow, victorious silence of the night of the feast, nor was it the desolate silence of the weeks that followed. This silence hummed. It was filled with the echoes of the words they had spoken, the crackle of the burning envelope, the unspoken truce that now hung in the air, fragile as a soap bubble. I stood by the fireplace for a long time, watching the last of the embers consume the physical proof of their sins. The heat felt good on my hands, which had grown thin and cold. The cancer, my constant, unwelcome companion, gave a dull throb in my chest, a reminder that this epilogue, however unexpected, had a firm and fast approaching end date. Mrs. Henderson found me there. She didn't say a word. She just picked up the poker, stirred the ashes until nothing remained but grey powder, and then placed a fresh log on the fire. The gesture was so simple, so utterly domestic, and yet it felt like a sacrament. She was cleaning the altar after the ritual was complete. "I'll bring up a tray," was all she said before leaving the room. I didn't have the appetite, but I knew I would eat what she brought. It was part of the new, unspoken contract of my existence. I was still living, and so the mundane routines of life had to be observed. The next few days were a strange, liminal space. The world outside the windows of Finchwood continued its autumnal decline, but inside, a tentative, green shoot of something new was trying to push through the frost. The phone didn't ring with lawyers' threats. The mail brought only bills and medical reminders. The siege was over. My body, however, was launching its final, decisive assault. The fatigue was no longer just tiredness. It was a leaden weight poured into my bones. The cough, once a tickle, was now a wrenching, barking thing that left me gasping and seeing stars. Dr. Evans, a kind man with tired eyes, came by and increased my morphine dosage. "For the pain," he said. But his eyes said, "For the journey." I accepted it. The sharp edges of the world began to soften. The past, with all its sharp regrets and crystalline betrayals, began to feel distant, like a story I had read long ago about someone else. It was in this softened state that Jeremy found me 2 days later. I was in the library, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the flames, but not really seeing them. "Grandfather." His voice was quiet, respectful. I turned my head slowly. The morphine made the movement feel viscous. "Jeremy." He came in and sat in the chair opposite me. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in dark jeans and a sweater. He looked like a man, not a CEO. He held a small, flat box in his hands. "I brought you something," he said, uncharacteristically hesitant. He placed the box on my lap. I fumbled with the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was an old, black and white photograph in a simple silver frame. It was a picture of me, decades ago, standing in front of my first factory. I was young, my hair was thick and dark, my smile was wide and unguarded. I had my arms slung around the shoulders of a young man I barely recognized for a moment, my own father, looking at me with a pride so fierce it seemed to emanate from the paper. I stared at it. I had forgotten this photo existed. "I found it in a box of old things in the corporate archives," Jeremy said, his voice low. "I don't know what I was looking for. Blueprints, maybe. Proof of something." He paused. "I found that instead." I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight. I look at that man, Jeremy said, nodding at the photo. I look at his face. He wasn't building an empire. He was building something for that man next to him. For his family. I lost sight of that. I thought the company was the point. The growth, the market share, the valuation. I thought that's what you cared about. That's what you taught me to care about. He looked at me, and for the first time, since he was a boy, his eyes were completely unguarded. I was wrong, wasn't I? The morphine let the tears come easily. They weren't tears of sadness or pain. They were tears of recognition. He had finally seen it. The thing I had forgotten myself. The company was just the tool. Jeremy, I said, my voice a rasp. It was never the point. The point was, I tapped the glass over my father's face. The point was this. He nodded, swallowing hard. I'm sorry I tried to break your tool. It's a strong tool, I said. It can take a few knocks. The foundation is still good. I meant the company. I also meant him. He stayed for an hour. We didn't talk about mergers or takeovers. We talked about my father. We talked about his first day at the factory. We talked about nothing of consequence and everything that mattered. His visit was followed, the next day, by Sarah's. She arrived carrying a large canvas, turned away from me. I'm not giving this to you, she announced, her voice still carrying a defensive edge, but it was thinner now, more performative. I'm just showing it to you, and I'm leaving it here, because my new studio is too small for it. She turned the canvas around. It was a painting of the dining room, the long mahogany table, the crystal, the silver, but the chairs were empty. The scene was depicted not with anger or fear, but with a profound, haunting sadness. The light from the chandelier was cold, illuminating the empty places where people should have been. It was masterful. It was brutal. It was the most honest thing she had ever created. It's called The Final Feast, she said. Not meeting my eyes, I looked at the painting, at the empty chair at the head of the table. My chair. It's magnificent, Sarah. She flinched, as if expecting criticism. You hate it. I hate what it represents, I said carefully. But the art is truth. You finally found it. She looked at me then, really looked, and the defensiveness melted away, leaving just a young woman, scared and proud, and desperately wanting to be seen for what she was, not what she had done. It hurts to look at, she whispered. It should, I said. The truth often does. That's why we spend so much time avoiding it. She left the painting leaning against the bookshelf, a stark, beautiful accusation and a silent testament to a night that had broken us all and was now, inexplicably, beginning to put us back together in a new, misshapen way. The days blurred into one another, a soft focus montage of morphine dreams and quiet visits. Eleanor came more often than the others. She didn't try to make amends or have profound conversations. She just came. She would read the newspaper aloud. She would tell me about her new job at the gallery, about the tediousness of cataloguing, about the strange characters she met. It was normalcy. It was a gift. She was there one afternoon when the doorbell rang. Mrs. Henderson, after a moment, appeared at the library door, her lips pursed in a familiar line of disapproval. It's Mr. Croft, she said, the title dripping with disdain. Eleanor and I exchanged a glance. A flicker of the old tension returned to the room. Send him away, Eleanor said sharply. No, I said, surprising us both. Send him in. Father, Eleanor warned. The treaty extends to all parties, Eleanor, I said. Or it means nothing. Benjamin Croft looked like a ghost of his former self. His expensive suit hung loosely on him. His tan had faded to a sickly grey. He stood in the doorway, clutching his hat, looking like a petitioner come to beg a favour from a king. Harold, he said, nodding. Eleanor. Benjamin, I said. To what do I owe the pleasure? He flinched at the word pleasure. I am leaving the city. I've sold my practice. There's nothing left for me here. I said nothing. I just waited. I came to return something. He stepped forward and placed a small, familiar-looking key on the table beside me. It was the key to the wine cellar, my wine cellar, the one that held the '89 Bordeaux, among other vintages, a key he had held for 20 years, for convenience's sake. I have no use for it anymore, I said. I know, he replied, but it was never mine to keep. It was a symbol of your trust. I violated that. I am deeply and permanently ashamed. The apology was there, in the raw, broken tone of his voice. It was in the return of the key. It was in the utter ruin of the man standing before me. What will you do? I asked. I have a brother in Oregon. He'll go there. Find something else to do. Something that doesn't require a moral compass. He attempted a smile, but it was a terrible thing to see. I looked at him. This man who had been my friend, and then my enemy. The anger was gone. The morphine saw to that. All that was left was a faint, dusty pity. I hope you find peace, Benjamin, I said. It was the most I could offer. He nodded. A quick, jerky movement. He looked at Eleanor, who was staring stonily out the window. Then back at me. Goodbye, Harold. He left. I never saw him again. Eleanor let out a long breath when he was gone. I hope he rots. He already is, I said quietly. Some prisons don't have bars. The weather turned colder. The world outside the window became a study in grey and brown. My world shrank to the confines of my bedroom. The library, with its demanding memories, was too far away. The morphine pump was my constant companion, its soft clicker metronome counting down the remaining measures of my life. Dr. Evans had a hospital bed brought in. It felt like a surrender. Mrs. Henderson fussed with the sheets, her face a mask of determined practicality, but her eyes were red-rimmed. It was a Tuesday, I think, when the end began to announce itself in earnest. The pain was a distant thing, a storm raging on a far-off horizon, but the feeling of leaving was immediate and undeniable. It was like being on a station platform, hearing the faint whistle of the approaching train. I asked Mrs. Henderson to call them. All of them. They came without question, without delay. Eleanor, Jeremy, Sarah. They gathered around the bed, their faces pale and serious in the soft light of the bedroom lamp. They looked like a family. My family. Is it? Eleanor began, her voice trembling. Soon, I think, I said. The words were an effort, my breath shallow. Sarah started to cry, silent tears. Jeremy put a firm hand on her shoulder. Don't, I whispered. No tears. Not now. I looked at them, these three people who had been the greatest joy and the greatest disappointment of my long life. I had wanted to leave them a legacy of wealth and power. Now, all I had to leave them was the truth, and perhaps, if they were wise, a warning. The feast I began, pausing to gather a breath that wouldn't come. It was a terrible thing I did. A monstrous thing. Father, don't, Eleanor said. No. I insisted, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. It must be said. I wanted to punish you. I wanted to hurt you as I had been hurt. I dressed it up as a desire for truth, but it was vengeance, pure and simple. I looked at each of them. I was wrong. The truth is not a weapon. It is a scalpel. It must be used with care. To heal, not to maim. I used it to maim. Jeremy's jaw was tight. We gave you the reason to, grandfather. Reasons are not excuses, I said. Remember that. You will wrong each other again. You will make mistakes. You are human. It is what we do. I took another ragged breath. The whistle of the train was louder now. When it happens, do not do what I did. Do not lay a trap. Do not stockpile your grievances for a final, bloody ambush. Talk, shout, scream at each other. But do it now. Do not wait until there is a poison between you, real or imagined. The effort exhausted me. I sank back into the pillows, the world swimming at the edges. We will, grandfather, Jeremy said, his voice thick. I promise. The money, I whispered. It's gone. To the foundations. It is better this way. You will have to build your own. I couldn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. They understood. They would have to build their own lives, their own legacies, free from the shadow of my fortune and my failures. Eleanor took my hand. Her grip was firm, warm. Sarah took the other. Jeremy placed his hand over ours. We were connected, a chain of flawed, broken, but trying people. The light in the room began to change. It grew softer, warmer, as if the lamp was being turned up, not down. The pain receded completely, replaced by a profound, all-encompassing peace. The sound of their breathing, of Sarah's soft weeping, of the clock ticking in the hall, all faded into a gentle, welcoming hum. I saw my father's face, beaming with pride from that old photograph. I saw my wife, Elizabeth, young and beautiful, smiling at me from across a dance floor a lifetime ago. The train wasn't scary anymore. It was coming home. I looked at my children, my grandchildren, one last time. I poured all the love I had left, all the regret, all the hope, into that final look. And then I let go. The hum became a silence. The light became everything. I, Harold Alastair Finch, had hosted my final feast. The table was cleared. The guests had gone home. And at last, there was peace.